All right, so now that we've given a simple tour through After Effects, let's talk a little bit more about how we get started actually creating content in the software. So After Effects works with compositions as its main file type. So first we're going to have to create a composition in order to do anything inside of it. So we can do that by going to Composition and New Composition, or we can hit Control N or Command N if you're working on a Mac. So I'm going to hit click that command, and I get a pop-up offering some settings for the composition I'm about to create. So first we can name the composition. That makes good sense. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to call it example comp for now because we're not going to use it for much more than just this simple lesson. And then I get a few more options under the basic controls, and that's just what we're going to focus on right now. So I have a lot of presets. These presets range from classic presets such as NTSC all the way through some more modern ones such as 4K and HD settings. I'm going to use HDTV 1080 and it's a 29.97 frame count. That's my default. As long as you're using one of these HD settings, you're probably in pretty good shape. So HDTV 1080 is the resolution, and then this is the frame count after that. So 29.97 is fine. After that, we have our width and our height. 1920 by 1080 makes that 1080 resolution. We can change these. We can scale them up or down, whatever we want them to be. And we can scale these to some ridiculous dimensions as well. 2665 by 1080, that's totally fine as far as After Effects is concerned. I'm going to leave it at 1980 though for now. Then we will have pixel aspect ratio. So some displays used a non-square pixel aspect ratio. It's not very common anymore, so we're going to leave this as square pixels. But sometimes when we're troubleshooting later, you might find your resolution squashed or stretched a little bit. Chances are it could be because of one of these less common aspect ratios. So we'll leave it at square pixels. Then we have our frame rate. 29.97 is incredibly common frame rate, but you might see frame rates of 30 frames per second is pretty common for digital work, and it makes the math easier just to understand how those frames work. Or 60 frames per second. If you're into games, you're probably familiar talking about FPS as a acronym to think about frames per second. So we have a few presets here. That 29.97 is pretty common. I'm going to use mine set at 30 just for now for simple math. So that way if you have to do a half second, it's very easy to just calculate 15 frames, etc. The resolution is going to be full. These are just smaller, or rather more simplified resolution renderings. Full is going to be great for now. And then we have our time code and duration. I want to take a moment to talk about time code and duration because it might be new to some of you. If you've ever worked in film before, this is going to be very familiar. If you've not, then I'll give you a quick tour through this. So time code is listed in hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. And there's a colon between each one of those. So this first 0 represents the hours. So a 1 here would make a 1 hour long composition or animation. Then we have our minutes. So a 20 here would be a 20-minute long animation. Then we have our seconds. So if we wanted this to be 10 seconds, we would back these zeros off and type in 10 for 10 seconds. Last is our frames. So that might be confusing to some of you. You might think that these first two are for seconds, so you might put a 10 here. That would result in a 10 frame long animation, which would be gone in a third of a second. So a 10:00 means 10-second long animation. Rather, this is our starting time code. So ignore that for just 1 second and understand that this is our starting time code and this is our duration. So right now, the same description applies, but we want to make sure that we're putting it in the right spot. So make sure that you're doing that clearly. Our start time code should be all zeros. That starts at 0 in our timeline. Duration is where we want the 10 seconds to live. Then we have an option for background color. Now this is just for convenience. This background color doesn't actually get rendered in most cases. So this is just a color that will help us be able to see our composition well against the interface. So I'm going to make mine for now just kind of this light lavender color. I'm going to hit OK. And you can see that a few awesome things have happened and changed in our interface. First, in our project window, we now see our composition example comp. We know it's a composition because it has this little film icon with a few shapes in it. That's the indication that this is a composition. And that means that it can have other things inside of it. Then our composition window updated. It shows example comp in the heading, example comp down here in kind of the breadcrumb browser tab. And then we see that lavender color that we created or that we chose with our composition settings. So let's say we wanted to change some things. We created a composition, but we don't like one of those settings, or we accidentally missed something. Or if you were like me initially, maybe we set our starting time code to 10 instead of our duration. If I'd have let that mistake go by, maybe we'd want to change that. So to change anything about our composition, we can go back up to that composition heading and then go to composition settings, or hit Control K, Command K works on a Mac. So in our composition settings, we can change all of those things that we just identified. So if I wanted to change my background color to say a lighter shade of that purple, I could hit OK, and it'll change for me there. There's our composition. I'm going to go ahead and undo that change actually, because I feel like that this darker color is a little bit more, allow me to kind of see it better against my interface. So now we've created a composition. It's not exactly like a PSD, but you might think about it that way, at least while you're kind of learning After Effects, is like, all right, this is like creating our first document to put things in. So this is what these compositions are. Or think of them like kind of like acts in a movie, right? So if you have your first act, that's like your first composition, right? And that's where all the action takes place. So now that we've created that composition, it's probably a good time to save this project. So I mentioned that compositions are kind of like a PSD. Well, they're not in some ways. And one of those ways is that you don't actually save compositions in like your file explorer on your computer. What you save is After Effects project files. Next, what I want to create is I want to create a solid object in our animation file. Solids are kind of the basic building blocks of After Effects that can be created within the program. So if you're not importing something like an image or an audio file, chances are you're going to be creating solids in your composition. Now to do that, we need to make sure our composition is selected, and then we can do Layer, New, Solid, or we can hit Control Y, Command Y. When we create a solid, we're going to get similar settings or a similar settings pop-up that we got with our composition. It's going to have different parameters within it, of course, but the first is the same, a name. So I'll name this block 1. This is going to be the first block that we're going to animate in our exercise. I can set its width and height. I don't want it to be 1980 by 1080, or 1920 rather. So I made that mistake earlier. Forgive me on that. I'll have to change that. So 1920 by 1080 is the intended size of my composition. Square pixels, etc. That's all fine. Let's go ahead and make this one, maybe a little bit lighter than this purple. And I don't want it to even be 1920. Let's make it 500 by 500. I'm going to hit OK. Now I have this block, and I can position it just by clicking and dragging it anywhere in my composition. And when I did that, a few things happened. One, when I hit OK, it created a solid on and in my composition. That's great. Now we can actually move something around. Two is it created this folder in my project window that includes solids. So it created this folder, and then block 1 is listed in there. So if I wanted to, think of this like a bin of Lego blocks, I can drag as many of these blocks out as I want. And each time I do that, you'll notice that it adds another block down here in my timeline. So this is where all of our objects can be interacted with in kind of a numeric way. We'll get there in a moment. And this is where all of my objects can be interacted with in more of a visual and physical way. So we'll get to that in just a second. Solids, much like your compositions, these can be changed just like we changed our composition. So if you remember, we went into composition settings to change details there. So let's fix that 20 error from before. I'm going to hit OK, and that fixes that. We can do the same thing with solids. So we can go into Layer and Solid Settings. Or you can hit Control-Shift-Y, Command-Shift-Y. Doing that brings up your solid settings dialog. I could name this something more descriptive. Instead of block 1, maybe it's blue block, in case I had multiples. I could change its width or height. So let's say we want this to be 200 by 200 instead. And I could change its color. So instead of that blue, we want it to be just a little bit darker or a little bit lighter. And when I do that, you can see that it's changing all of those instances of block that I brought out onto my stage. This is pretty neat. So that means if I had multiple blocks all in my composition and I wanted to change all of them, all I have to do is change the source. This might be kind of akin to changing a linked image or a smart object in Photoshop, which then kind of populates all of those objects. So think of this as like your bin of Lego blocks. If I change blue block, it's going to change every example or instance of blue block found in my composition. Not only that, but it will change it if it's found in other compositions that we make down the road. So it's a really cool concept. Now, if I wanted to make another solid, and let's say I brought another one out here, and I said, oh, you know what? I want this one to be green. If I go into my layer, solid settings, I can uncheck this box that says affect all layers that use this solid. If I uncheck that, then it's me making a completely new block. You can see it already made it blue block 2. So let's go ahead and make a green block. And we can back off that too because we don't need that. And then I'm going to make this, maybe a shade of like bright green or mint. That's pretty good. And then instead of saying OK, the option is new because it's actually creating a new solid. And so now I have green block and blue block up here. I'm going to go ahead and delete a few of these because I don't really need all of them. So to do that, I can select them in my composition very easily. Or I can select them down here in my timeline, and it does both. And I can just hit the delete key. So I can very quickly select and delete, and notice it didn't delete them out of my project folder. They're still in my project. They just don't exist in my composition or in my timeline anymore. So that exposes one of a constant quirks that we'll talk about in After Effects, which is there are multiple ways to get the same job done in After Effects. And that goes for just about every function or feature. So when I was trying to select and delete items, I could select them up here in my composition. I could also select them down here in my timeline. And both options kind of get the same job done. So there you have it. Creating solids, positioning them in your stage, making new compositions, changing their settings, making sure we don't make any mistakes, and saving out a project.